Welcome to BIM Broadcast, everybody. My name is Shawn Zirbes. I'm host here at the BIM Broadcast Show, technical evangelist. My technical employment, I guess, is at CTC, CAD Technology Center. But we're doing this BIM Broadcast Show to bring you the names, the people, the faces of building information modeling across the industry. So today, our goal is to talk with you about hardware. We're going to be focusing very heavily on the hardware that drives uh, all that is building information modeling, all that is Revit, all that is other softwares as well. We're not just focused on just Revit. So we're going to jump in and talk to Buck Davis today from Bimbox. And welcome to the show, Buck.
Yeah, John, thanks for having me on, man. It's been a while since we got to catch up in Toronto, but I appreciate you having me on.
Right on. So you're playing full recovery from the Built conference up there in Toronto, I assume, right?
Built then Irma.
Built
Irma
then
just
Irma,
happened.
yeah, yeah. So it was two hurricanes in a row for you.
It was two hurricanes, and I'm not quite sure which one hit me harder. I'm starting to think Built still holds the title on that one.
Right, right. Yeah, no, Built was depending on how hard you partied there and how much you stayed up and did not sleep, it could be quite the event. So,
Right.
and those Australians that host that, boy, they know how to throw a party. I tell you what.
Tell me about it, man. That last night was awesome.
Yeah,
The
no
big
joke.
party at the end. So
Right on. Well, let's get an introduction into you and into what you do and who you are. So you work at a company called Bimbox, and your guys' goal is to focus on hardware, bringing quality, really good hardware with great integrity into people's firms. That's like the main goal you guys do, right?
application specific
Yeah.
workstations and laptops. That's pretty much it. So many different solutions in the AC market right now. We came to find through personal experience, my partner David Thurwell and I, that computer companies, big box shops weren't building machines for them. It's just we're in a niche subset. We have big files, big models, different softwares use different CPUs, different
Yep.
processors, different everything. So it's important to us to be successful. So we went out and started making them for ourselves. And then that turned into this company.
Right
So,
on. Well, that's awesome. So before we start talking directly about the hardware, let's talk a little bit about you. So
okay.
how did you get your start in the industry that we're in right now, just so people can understand where you're coming from?
Yeah. So my mom and dad growing up, they were builders and developers. My dad was a residential developer and my mom was a builder. And when I was in high school, I was sweeping out houses, post sheetrock, pre-paint, cleaning up job sites, this, that, and the other, and then got into an internship developing land through college, did land development, and thought I was going to do that forever. Absolutely loved being out on job site, clearing and grubbing the trees, bringing in the grading crews. Who doesn't love bulldozers? And then the market tanked 2007, 2008, and I had to find something else to do, right?
Right.
So I got into residential sales and design. I started off with some track builders, worked my way up to high-end residential in Atlanta on the north side.
And what software were you using when you were doing that?
Well, it was CAD initially was what the architect was doing.
AutoCAD, like not
Yeah,
AutoCAD architecture, just AutoCAD.
AutoCAD and PDFs.
All
And
right,
the
nice.
biggest struggles we had was they were semi-custom homes, so clients would come in, sit down. I'd work with them. What rooms do we want to change?
Right.
What do we want to expand? How is this house going to come together? Do an estimate, start figuring out costs for them, and then we'd start looking at moving forward and what lot. My background in development helped me with that because there's so much topo in Atlanta. Um, and I got tired of having to wait to get changes back, so I found Revit, started modeling, dabbling in it, and then had a bunch of success, man. Everybody wants to know what that kitchen's going to look like. Everybody
Right.
wants to know how it's going to sit on the lot, and what better way than actually to model it and show them. From there, I jumped. I got an opportunity with a Autodesk reseller. They were starting a construction technology group, working with laser scanners, robotic total stations, advanced Revit implementations for manufacturing, construction companies, BIM 360 field and glue. And I was hooked, man. I went to the interview. They showed me some of the stuff, and I was bought in. Everything that they were doing was so applicable back in the day when I was doing, civil and land development. It just made sense and kind of clicked. So I was with them for about 2 or 3 years. Got trained on a host of different things. Great with layout now, awesome with laser scanners, and
Excellent.
bumped into a company, Balfour Beatty Construction in Florida. They were working on the Avatar theme park at the time, and had an opportunity to do some consulting on that. So when I left the reseller I was working for, I got a call from Balfour. They knew I wasn't with them anymore. And they said we had two people leave in South Florida. Why don't you come down and take the spot and go off to the races? So my good friend Zach Thompson at the time, who was running the VDC department for Balfour in Florida, got me hired on, and I was with them, and I'm still with them. But it's been an amazing experience. I've worked on some big jobs. Worked on some very innovative jobs at Disney. It's always interesting when you're working with clients that do crazy things. I think right now we're working on the logistics of installing a 10-ton, 30-foot wide ham, which I know that seems strange, but it is a interesting challenge. It's always different every day, and
Nice.
it's a lot of fun.
So let's talk about hardware here. How did you, through that experience, specifically get into hardware and your expertise that you've got now?
So we had an initiative at Balfour for real-time rendering. We wanted to do VR. We wanted to do a couple other things. And at the time, I was working on a Dell Precision Tower. It was a beast, 128 gigs of RAM, dual CPU, and it was just terrible. I mean, I had the worst experience with Revit files. I was struggling with InfoWorks. Everything just took forever.
Now wait a second. This sounds like the computer that most of us would have loved to have had, like the ideal spec for a BIM workstation.
Oh yeah, no, this is like top of the line everything. And it was just three graphics cards, three Quadros.
Jeez.
It was, yeah, but it couldn't do real-time rendering. We had an Oculus, we had an HTC Vive.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here trying to plug it up, and everybody might be listening. You see this does not meet the minimum requirements. And there's nothing worse than buying a Oculus and a Vive and then realizing you're not going to watch VR. You're not going to experience it, and it's your computer. So we went out to look to upgrade the computer, and this is 1 or 2 years ago. Actually, it's two and a half years ago. There's no upgrading those computers. So I went to my boss. I was like, look, I have experience in this. My partner Dave was a subcontractor working with us. We hacked away at it, and we built our first Revit VR machine, and it was awesome. I mean, I could work with InfoWorks models, the entire city of Miami, which we replicated.
Nice.
We started aggregating our Revit models, our past projects, future projects in that infrastructure model, and then it was nice, but it was wonky because then no one else could actually collaborate with me, because they couldn't open up the model on their laptop or their computer.
None of us have ever experienced that problem before.
Yeah. So, then David pitched to me and he said, hey, we're struggling with this backlog of data from our scans. We have 2 scanners. We're scanning every day. And right now, my laptop is smoking in the corner, and it takes forever. We're never getting ahead, right? So we started hacking away. We built our first laser scanning computer. And then we started looking at different things, different ways to make them go faster and what we would do, and started digging into other applications we were working on. And then people started asking us to build them one. So it started out, here or there, we're doing 2 a week, 3 a week. And then it got to 5 or 6 a week, and we both have day jobs. So it was kind of like, we need to hire some people. We're onto something, and no one else is doing this, right? So anytime there's a problem, you can solve it, and no one else is doing it. You got to jump on the opportunity. Although when I told my parents and he told his wife that we were going to start a desktop computer company in 2017, it wasn't, initially it's a kind of like, you got to be kidding me.
That was a more difficult sale than it is to the IT departments on the computers you're selling, right?
Completely. And we can get over those hurdles. Trust me, we have them. I have 3 emails today that I have to get to with IT managers saying, well, why do we need this? This is crazy. But, once you've experienced it, you can't go back. I mean, I think like everybody else, the first time you were highly productive, or better yet, let's say this, the first time you have fantastic internet speed and you can actually stream videos and open files and work with files in the cloud. It's a game changer. And then you go back and don't have internet and you feel literally like someone has taken your soul out of you. It takes so long. We've continued to progress, and it's turned into a really, really fun company. We've met a ton of people. We've helped a lot of people. And I think, the way we view the market right now, and I think this will probably be a highly debated statistic, but we probably and we talked about this before the show, if you look at the market as a whole in the U.S., maybe 5 to 10% of projects actually from start to finish execute properly in BIM. With great process, great data, everything's correct, which means we have a 90% market opportunity. As that continues to evolve and grow, so will our company, right? As softwares become more advanced and as price on some of these laser scanners come down, you're creating massive amounts of data. And how do you process it? How do you work with it? How do you handle it? How do you manage it? And right now, we feel that we're the only person focused on this industry, this market, and being niche specific in specific applications. Every time you look at a hardware or a spec sheet for your new software, they have a minimum requirement and then they have a recommended requirement. And I won't say that anybody's being dishonest, but I will say that most companies selling $6,000 to $7,000 software solutions don't always want to alert you to the fact that you're probably going to need to buy a more expensive computer
Right.
to have a good experience.
It's a scary thing to throw out there. Like, hey man, you got a $7,000 investment in our software. Oh, and you got a $7,000 investment in a computer too per person, right? Like that's a scary thing to throw out there. It's a tough sale at that point when you're upfront and honest at that level.
Well, it is, but once a company or once an individual has decided that software is the right thing for them,
Right.
it shouldn't be that big of a leap of faith to say there's something that goes along with it, right?
It shouldn't be.
You don't buy Revit to nickel and dime people. You're buying Revit
Yeah.
because you're an architectural firm or you're a construction company and you have work and you have big projects and you have to execute on them.
Exactly.
$7,000 on most project, it's a rounding error, if anything. We try to stay positive and focused on that. Getting into, I guess, hardware and some of the specifics that we do, I kind of want to touch on, each component because I think
absolutely.
for a long time, everyone, we were talking about this beforehand as well, and our go-to-market partner, Phil Reed and Adam Thomas, they were very kind of artistic, sophisticated, nuanced people. And they have guitars, musicians, and I always like to joke that they have no idea what's in their computer. They have no idea what tool they're using. Whereas everybody else, chefs know what knives they have, artists know what kind of paintbrushes, they save up to buy these things. That's their craft and that's their tool to trade. I even know framers that they won't work with a hammer different than the hammer they always use because this is their job, right?
Yeah, but let's kind of make another parallel here in the world of architecture. Like architects know their tools, their design tools, which is, Revit. They know Revit as a tool that they're using. That's like a chef's knife, right? They know Photoshop. They know a number of other, softwares that are out there, SketchUp, Dynamo, right? They know the tools, but they don't know what's driving the tools. In much the same way I would say, like, if we go back to the chef example, the chef doesn't know how to assemble his stove.
Right.
He just knows how to cook on it. He knows how to turn it on. He knows how to cook on it. And that's not his specialty. But if he wants to get the better stove, he's going to go to a specialist and buy that stove. And in your case, if I want a better computer to run my software on, I should be talking to somebody who's specialized in building that and not just going to necessarily a big box. Because I can go to Whirlpool and buy a stove, but that's not necessarily going to suit my needs if I'm a high-end chef, right?
You're going to go get a Viking or you're going to go Sub-Zero.
Yeah.
And even people that don't necessarily, cook all the time, they still want that. That's kind of the elite status symbol. Not necessarily for what we're doing, but completely. I like that parallel. That's perfect.
Yeah. So let's start talking about the nuts and bolts. Like what makes a good computer? And let's start before that. Let's start with me on my computer. How do I find out what it is that I have so that I can understand what my current limitations are, what I can expect for performance? So everybody who's listening in today, when they're going back to their office or they're sitting there right now, kind of following along live, how do we go about finding out, like, do I have a quality computer that can run Revit in a meaningful way to the level that I need?
So the best way to do it, one, you can go into your folder, right click on your C drive or on my computer and go to properties, and it will show you some information if you do this.
I'm gonna do this right now. I'm actually gonna pull up Windows Explorer here on screen. I'm gonna do this. Go to my computer or this PC, and I'm gonna go to properties. Right. This is the information that I'm actually running on. And oddly enough, well, my computer's running a little slow right now because I'm running Microsoft SQL. I'm running Power BI, 2 different reports. I'm running the broadcasting software. I'm live streaming. I have a Skype call that is sharing my desktop to you, and it's also streaming live to YouTube. So, like, my computer, this is a laptop, by the way, everybody who's out there. This laptop is doing way more, I think, than this laptop was intended to do. But let's take a look at some of the information we got here with Buck on the phone. So Yeah, I went into my computer information, my control panel.
Got you. So now we're looking at, so you have a 6700 HQ CPU,
Yep.
2.6 gigahertz, which is going to be the clock speed.
Right.
I know this CPU. It's a four core CPU, 16 gigabytes of RAM. That's interesting, but it's not enough information, and we can kind of look at how to get more information. Because
Right.
one thing just to touch on, RAM is not just capacity; it's also speed and latency.
Right.
So just things that you don't get here. We don't see what drive you have. I'm guessing it's a solid state drive, but once again, for a Bimbox, for someone who builds these things, we'd want to know model, make, and capacity to get the overall performance of it.
Yeah, I do know that the OS drive is a solid state. It's probably 256, and then the data drive that I have is a mechanical for now.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Spinning drive.
Spinning drive.
Nice. Yep. It's always I don't hate spinning drives, and I think we put a lot of them in our systems just for the fact that some people need 18 terabytes with redundancy. But it's always kind of baffled me that people put spinning drives in laptops, because if you drop them, it messes up a spinning drive.
Right.
Just throwing it out there. I know it's cheap and you can add a terabyte and it sounds great when you're selling a computer, but it's a spinning drive, and it's not supposed to be moved around and set down and slapped on a table and this, that, and the other. But
if you're dropping your laptop in the first place, I'm just saying, maybe consider don't drop your laptop. Just saying.
Fair. It happens though. Come on, we can't.
True.
For the
Oh, by the way, just in case you guys didn't join us a little earlier, I want to let you all know the live chat is being watched. So if you've got comments or questions while we're going through this and you want us to add that to the show, throw that into the live chat, man. We're watching that window like a hawk. So you can feel free to make this a dialogue or a trialogue or a quadrilogue or whatever you want to do with your conversation there. So feel free to add in. All right, let's jump back over here to the control panel. So anything else you wanted to take a look at or want me to pull up so you can see on this system?
One of the things that I'd recommend, and I don't know if you can do it right now, and we'll touch on this in a little bit, would be benchmarking. So they're benchmarks, and for the people that don't know what a benchmark is, it's a test that's created. And you can create benchmarks for graphics. You can create it for single thread, single CPU, single core. You can go multi-thread. You can make one for pretty much whatever you want. My favorite and our favorite at Bimbox that we are constantly hacking away on, especially this last week, we got a beta test. Gordon Price, one of the godfathers of the RFO benchmark and a good friend of Bimbox, sent us a beta test of the RFO benchmark 2018. So what the benchmark does is it runs the same set of tests on your computer as everybody else's computer, and it tracks time or frame rate or whatever metric we're looking to track. And then it spits out your score. Okay. Sometimes it's not as important. You kind of want to be more focused on what you're trying to test. But the Revit benchmark, Gordon posts, it's true time. So we actually set this week and we tracked from a 2.5 gigahertz clock speed to a 2.6 to 2.7, all the way up to 5.2, and track the time. So it typically comes out in seconds. I think our 2.5 gigahertz, which is very close to what you have on your laptop, performed the set in about 128 seconds, whereas a Bimbox Striker at 5.2 gigahertz did it in 74 seconds, which that's a true time though. I mean, so you're looking at the delta between 128 and 74, we have 54 seconds.
Yeah.
Almost a minute.
Right.
Almost a minute better, and that's true time. That's the efficiency you would gain doing that through and throughout. There are rendering benchmarks in the RFO benchmark, but we typically stick to the performance. If you think about your typical Revit user, day in, day out, they're not hitting render, right? Either they're rendering in the cloud now, or they have a real-time gaming engine that they're getting images out of. So we try to avoid that. The benchmarks you're looking at here, if we can scroll up, we're looking at 3D. Well, this is Passmark, would be a great one. It's free, 30-day trial. It's going to do overall system performance. It'll do CPU. It'll check your single thread, which is just one single thread, how fast that's going and how well it can perform.
Yep.
Well, excuse me, not how fast it's going, how well it can perform at the speed it's going. Multi-core, how many cores do you have? If you have more cores, that you'll perform better in that test. It's going to do 2D graphics, 3D graphics, disk, memory, and that's it. It gives you an overall score. We like to say that Passmark's a great general benchmark tool. You're not going to get a great score if you have slow dual Xeons, right? But you might not get a great score if you have a slow 4-core. So we just put this in perspective compared to all those systems in the world, how well you're performing.
Right.
Um, the disk mark you're looking at right there, we actually set a world record on disk mark for pass mark using our cache tool and our RAID drive. And we'll get into that a little bit more when we get nuts and bolts hardware. But that 92,000 is a world record, and I think Passmark had somewhere between 500,000 or 600,000 submissions. So
Nice. So, by
this
the
is
way, guys, just those of you who are listening in, I want to let you guys know if you're like, what in the world are you talking about? Raid this, benchmark this. Like, what do I know? We're going to go through the nuts and bolts and the actual parts and pieces and explain those. So, those of you who may not be, PC building experts, you'll get a really solid idea of what we're going to be talking about here and why these numbers mean what they mean and what you can do, what kind of tools you can get, what kind of hardware you can get to help improve your numbers. So, if you run this Passmark test on your computer and you're noticing that you're not at the same level that these computers are, because you won't be, then because obviously if they're setting world records, obviously your computer's probably not going to match that. So yeah, we're going to be explaining that in just a moment here as we transition over to that.
And one thing to chime in on this is getting into system specs. So if you go to a Lumion or you go to a Fuser or you go to an Inkscape,
right,
a lot of times in their recommended spec, they'll say above a 12,000 in Passmark. So when you go to Passmark, if you run this test and your 3D graphics are above 12,000, they're saying it will perform well on your system.
Right.
So just to give you the heads up, and looking in specs, some will say 3D Mark, which is the next one down. It's another test you can get. You can download a free version. They have paid versions of this. This was on 3D Mark 11, the Performance 1.0. We have the highest score for a system under $5,000,
nice.
which we are proud of. And if you look, that's actually one of the first ones we built. It has a 6700K CPU, which we use the 7700K now. So that's an old classic, man. That's the one sitting on my desk.
Nice, nice, awesome.
So I'm proud of that. And if you scroll down even more, we start looking at what's the 30 mark, the Vantage performance. So this is a test that's going to test your graphics and your CPU for highly parallel options. If you look at 7644.5, it was a Hall of Fame. We're actually top 100 on that. And then if you look at the graphics performance, the nice thing about the 3D Mark is it'll show you how you stack up against a 4K gaming PC, a gaming
right.
PC for HTC Vive, a laptop, a notebook, an office PC. And I think it's interesting if you look at that because most people and most AEC people have an office PC, right?
Yep.
We're buying Dell, we're buying HP. That's kind of where we've been. And when you look at the gaming, they're getting better graphics, but we'll get into the nuts and bolts and the difference.
Right.
This Revit Benchmark 2017, this is a great way just to kind of look at what you're doing. So the model creation benchmark, this is really where we think the nuts and bolts come together. This is what most people are doing day in, day out, right? Creating groups, moving things, copying, modifying, adding curtain walls. So if you run this benchmark on your tool and you get 150 and you say, well, man, if I could get something that was 75 seconds, I'm saving 50% of time when I'm working in Revit. That's a true time savings. And when you think about what that transmits into your ability to bill out more hours, get more jobs, make your people more efficient, that was the end game for us. It's not
right.
just to have a crazy computer on your desk or under your desk. It's to actually bring efficiencies to the things we do every day, right? So anybody I'd recommend, go out and check it out. I think Gordon just posted the RFO benchmark on the Revit forum, another great place to go to get information. It's a free website. Just log in, and they have great answers and great knowledge base there. And kudos to him and the people for hosting that.
Yeah, he just recently announced that the benchmark is here. Now, this benchmark right now, if I recall correctly, and Gordon will be on the show, actually. Let me double-check exactly when. I believe it was October 20th is the show that he'll be on in the near future here. Just
nice.
Clicking over and checking so that we can actually get the words directly from him. Yeah, the 20th is the show he'll be on. So make sure you're keeping an eye on our channel for that. Get signed up for that one. That'll be announced here very shortly. But yeah, he's going to be able to talk about this tool in a lot of depth, as well as his rollout tools. And I like his his tagline here, which we'll cover more with him, which is deployments that fail to suck. That's my favorite. I love it.
I have not seen that, but that's so Gordon.
Yeah,
Man,
absolutely.
anytime, I tell you, David and I, we started benchmarking in Revit. Just a quick story about it. And we started pinging Gordon because we knew he did it. And so we're sending him emails, we're sending messages, and no one's replying. And I think he thought we were, two kids that had a machine they built, wanted to talk shop with him, right?
Right?
So at Bill, this was the first time we actually got to meet him. We're setting up our booth, and I go, I heard Gordon's going to be here. I hope we finally get a chance because I got a bone to pick with him. He never replies to my messages, and all of a sudden, he's like, who's got a bone to pick with me? And he walked around
Nice.
the corner, and I'm like, Gordon, and he's like, this is who you are, and so that was the beginning of a good friendship, and we've
That's
been
awesome. That's
on
awesome.
back and forth. But anytime you get people that really care about these metrics, these numbers, and really want to push the industry, I mean, he does all this stuff at no charge. I mean,
Yeah.
it's wild. There aren't that many people out there in this industry
Truth.
that doing things for the industry's good, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Shameless, we all have to pay bills, but it's nice when someone does something like that. So big shout out to Gordon.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. All right, so let's start digging in here. Let's talk nuts and bolts. What are the parts and pieces that we want to really focus on when we're trying to spec out a computer or understand what's going on with the computers?
Okay, we're going to go on and start. I'm going to jump around from what I sent you earlier. I know everyone, when you buy computers, and most people do, you ask them what they have. I got an i7. Well, they make 15 or 20 different i7 CPUs. That's not good enough, right?
Right.
So some of the things that are important to look at, and initially we like to look at the processor, and this is great. You pulled up the 7700K. So let's kind of dig in. A lot of people don't know necessarily what we're looking at. Some of this stuff is important, some of it's not. The lithograph, that's a 14 nanometer, that's the size. The die size, they've been shrinking, and it'll continue to get smaller until we get something else. Cores, 4 and 8, that's great. Base processor frequency, 4.2, solid. This is one of the reasons we started looking at this CPU. That's a high clock speed. If you just noticed, your laptop has 2.8. When it comes to programs like Revit is a single core, in many instances, single thread program.
Yep.
It doesn't matter if you have 1,000 cores, it won't make Revit perform better. It's
Exactly.
all about how fast that one core, one thread is going. So at 4.2, that's great. Turbo frequency, this is another kind of misleading thing. A lot of times when you look at a computer, it says up to 4.5, right? 4.5 is a turbo boost that happens for less than half a second, maybe a second, and it gets your laptop hot as hell. If you've ever picked up your laptop and it's almost burning, it's due to the turbo boost.
I'm actually fixing to cook an egg on mine. I just put my hand on my laptop right now. This thing is just smoking right now.
Right? And a computer, it's very similar to your car. I want you to think of the CPU as your engine, right? So, when you're going down the highway, your temperature starts going up. When you actually go faster, more air is coming in and cooling your engine, so it cools off. But this is a pretty good turbo frequency. Then we want to go down to the next one we look for is your PCIe lanes. Well, we'll stop at memory first. So the max memory size on this chipset, 64 gigabytes. Okay, up to 64 gigabytes. You can't go past that on this one. Memory channels, we won't get too far into that, but this is a 2-channel, not going to make a huge impact. On our over 4-core machines, we have a 4-channel, quad channel. And then you look, it has 4K resolution on the chip, so you don't have to have a graphics card, designated graphics card with this CPU. We do, because in this industry, everybody needs a designated graphics card. So we actually turn that off. That's one thing that is not advertising to us. And then we go down to the PCIe lanes, if you don't mind scrolling down. So there we go, 16.
Where am I at here? I missed
Scroll up a little bit.
Up just a touch. There we go.
A little bit more.
Oh, I missed it. Oh, there it is. Yep, there it is. PCIe.
There it is. PCI configurations. So one thing when you look in your car, your PCIe is your peripheral devices. So if you open your computer up and you have a graphics card in there, that is sitting in a PCIe slot. If you have a new NVMe PCIe drive, it could be sitting in that slot. You might have extra USB slots. That is a direct connection to your CPU. 16 signifies how many lanes you have for information to go flow forward and backwards to. This is 16. A single graphics card needs 16 lanes. So on this CPU, with nothing else in play, you could have a single graphics card. One of the things that I'm going to jump to on the next one, which will make this make a little more sense, is motherboards. The minute you have your CPU picked out, you want to look at your motherboard.
Right.
A lot of people discount this, and all motherboards are the same. It's got a CPU, it's got lanes, it's got a bunch of X16 slots, which is the PCIe 16 slots in there. But when you plug everything in, it doesn't always work like that. When you start looking at motherboards, and I don't know if you can jump to the chipset drawing of the Z270.
Let's see. Is that right there?
Yeah, this is it right here. Okay, so one thing you want to look at, this is how everything comes together, okay? And you look at the top and it says 1x16 if you only have one card in. If you have two in, it drops to 8. And if you add any more, it drops even more, right?
Right.
So if you think about this, a lot of times you'll buy a computer, and not a lot of times, but people buy computers with 2 or 3 graphics cards in it, thinking they're getting full performance on 3 graphics cards. Well, you're not. You're getting one probably at 16 and the rest at 8. You spend all this money on these graphics cards and components, and you're not getting throughput to the CPU. You'll even look on this, and this is one of the things that kind of not worrisome, but what you can run into is a lot of times your USB ports share bandwidth with your PCI lanes, which can even reduce that number even more. You want to think about this. The more lanes you have, the more things you can connect and the more communication you can have with that CPU. The motherboards that we use on this model actually have these switches called PLX switches, which expand the addresses through the PCIe bus. So we have on our Striker model, which has this CPU in it, we have the only motherboard that actually accommodates 2 graphics cards at X16 speed, which is really something we're proud of. But it took us a long time to find that. I mean, if you want to talk about minutia, David and I my wife used to kill me. We'd be sitting in bed and I'm scrolling through looking at the engineering, samples of boards like this. And I'm finally, you're like, bingo. And then you send it to him and he's like, wow, it doesn't have this, that, and the other. And it's routed wrong. Right. So a good motherboard can make everything great and a bad one can make your life hell.
Right. Well, I mean, basically your motherboard is your foundation of your system.
It is. But how many people, and raise your hand if you know, Shawn, what kind of motherboard do you have?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. There's no way I could tell you. It's a pre-built laptop by MSI. I don't know what they put in there.
Exactly. And a lot of times, people don't think about this stuff, but inevitably that's what connects all these parts together, right? Next thing we're going to talk about is RAM. RAM is extremely important for your system, but I think for too long and very similar to a drive, people talk about capacity. I have 128 gigabytes of RAM, which I said earlier on that tower. But they're DDR 2100 speed, which is brutal. It's the slowest thing you can get out there. It's extremely inexpensive. DDR 2400 is what they put in most computers because that's what Intel recommends.
Right.
And if you look in here, this is the reason. If you can go down to Excel, 95% of people the big box stores sell to are doing Excel, they're doing Office, they're doing Outlook. If you jump to a higher RAM speed, and this is kind of what it's showing, if you can go to the left, it shows DDR 2133, and then up to 4000, which is what we put in ours. In Excel, you don't really see that big of a difference.
Yeah, it's 3 seconds, 0.3 seconds of time difference for whatever they're doing with their test.
So the reason this becomes important for AEC, and just to specify what RAM is RAM is randomly accessed memory. Okay, it's the fastest thing in the world. Your computer has it. And when you open up and you start manipulating and working with files, it happens on RAM because that's the quickest way for the CPU to interact with that information. When you do Excel, you're not really doing a lot, right? But if you drop down to Adobe Photoshop CC, a program which is more similar to an AEC program, where you're actually manipulating files and working with filters and working with all kinds of heavy information, you start to see a big performance increase. Right here, they're saying you get a 54% from DDR 4000 over the baseline, which I think is DDR 2133, and a 31% increase with the DDR 3200. So, it does make a big impact. And when you think about programs that we're using in the AEC industry, whether that's point clouds or photogrammetry or Revit models or anything else, this is where those little nuance efficiencies come in.
And by the way, I also want to point out right here, because you can kind of see this in this graph, we have these discussions a lot with IT teams of a point of diminishing returns, right? Like you can keep throwing money at a problem. Maybe at some point they'll have DDR4 8000, right? And maybe you get an extra, millisecond on the opening or processing with Photoshop CC, but is it worth it enough to you to jump to that level if it's just, you can see this graph here is, rapidly declining in its speed, but then it starts to taper off a little bit. Now, this is still pretty significant, right? Like over a day, a second every time you're doing an opening of a file or whatever the case may be, processing of something, that's still meaningful. But at some point, if it becomes that 0.1 second, like up here in Excel, if I'm in Excel and I'm an Excel user, I don't really care about this DDR4 2133 versus the 4000. It's not going to really give me a payoff to go to that level because it's 0.3 seconds versus in a more powerful program when it actually means something to me.
Well, and just to point out, Photoshop, I don't know the ins and outs of Photoshop.
Right.
I know there's a program similar to ours, but, I was working, benching one of our new prototype systems on a Pix4D mapper, which if you have enough RAM, Pix4D does not leverage your drive. It won't touch your C drive. It won't even go to our RAID drive. It loads all that information up on RAM. So I was noticing when I'm in Pix4D, there are 20 gigabytes of RAM being used by that program. I needed the capacity, but I also needed the speed. That is where something like this, that speed, will pick up when you're processing for an hour. Pharaoh Scene, Recap, a lot of those other programs really do leverage this, especially when you're getting into InfoWorks, infrastructure modeling. Revit's very heavy on RAM. This is where you pick up that time. This is what makes a difference. I know, like you said, we don't have to always use DDR4000, and on our larger kits, you can't get 128 gigabytes of RAM, DDR4000, but you can get a DDR3600 with a low latency that's just lightning fast. I mean, it makes a massive impact. The other thing that we want to chime in on this, so at Bimbox, we created a block level caching solution, and I know that sounds kind of strange for anyone listening. We call it our Drive Accelerator. We paired up with a company that had a product out for about 15 years ago, and when Windows only would let you have 4 gigabytes of RAM, they figured out a way to get between the operating system and the computer to let you add 8, and then you use 4 as whatever you want for cache.
Right.
And when you think about cache is, it's like a store all that may need to be used very shortly. So what we can do with ours is you can allocate a portion of your RAM to serve as the cache for your solid state drive. It works great with spinning drives, like we said, because they're slow, and this will give a 5 times increase on a spinning drive. So the first time you open a file or a computer calls for a file, it goes to the main drive that you're calling from where that file is, and it pulls it to the CPU, and it also copies it over to an allocation of RAM. The next time you call for that file, it pulls it directly from RAM, which is the fastest thing you can have in the world. Right. So by having a higher speed RAM running as your cache on your drive, you're not only getting performance better when you're actually using the RAM, you're getting performance out of it on your solid state drive, which for many programs we use, Navisworks, Revit, a lot of other programs are really IO bound, meaning that they're reading and writing from a drive constantly. So speeding that up is going to bring massive efficiencies, and that's one of the things that we drive home. Everybody I ask, I got a Samsung, I got a terabyte. They make 50 different drives.
Right.
Yeah, and we only use the Samsung 960 Pro. It's the new NVMe M2 form factor. It looks like a stick of bubble gum, and it has up to 2 terabytes on it.
Yeah, they're ridiculously small. If you guys haven't seen those new solid-state hard drives, oh my gosh, they're tiny.
I was thinking I might actually have one. One second, let me grab this real quick. Not to run off stage.
It's all good. It's all good. No worries. So this is a jump drive, a thumb drive that was given to me by one of my clients, right? You can see just comparison, standard finger size, thumb drive. This is what I think 128 megabytes. 128 megabytes in file size, just basic jump drive. All right. So what do you got there?
This is better yet, this is a Post-it note, right? This is a 500 gigabyte NVMe drive.
Good Lord. That's amazing.
It's night and day difference. So that's where we're getting into drives. Now let's go down and we'll talk about our disk drives. Nobody really thinks drive speed's important. Everybody says I have an SSD or I have this, that, and the other, and why would I spend that much money on a NVMe drive? Everything you do on your system is going to be, this is the bottleneck. Right. This is historically and moving through the future, this is going to be the bottleneck of performance. Your CPU can crunch as fast as it can. Graphics cards can crunch 3 times faster than that. RAM can go lightning fast. And your drive is going to be the one thing that has to feed them all, right?
It's where all your information is stored. It's where all your programs are stored. Everything has to load off of that before it can get into any of those other locations.
Think about a race, where they hand off the torch. Everybody's geared up. You got lightning fast people to get the baton, second, third, and fourth, and the first person is a turtle. They're literally walking down the aisle waiting to give this person a baton, and that is literally what your computer is doing when you have a slow drive. It's just dying for that information to come through. So David and I, being drive nuts, we went out and we started looking at different configurations. So there's this thing called RAID. It's a redundant array of independent drives. Right? So that's true, and it's not always true, because a RAID 0 is actually not redundant. We like to call it a rapid array of independent drives. And if you scroll down, there are different versions of RAID. Anyone, your IT people will probably know all about this. RAID 0, RAID 1, RAID 5, there's a RAID 6, RAID 10. And the idea of this was you can have redundancy. So you can put 2 drives in your computer, and in RAID 0, you can make them 1 drive. Twice as fast as a single drive, because it's writing A and B to both different drives.
Right.
It can tell one. It's like if you were reading the alphabet and writing it down, you had 2 people, just A, B, C, D, E, F, and so forth. RAID 1, which is what a lot of people like, it's completely mirrored. So anything that is on disk 1 also exists on disk 2. The reason this is important for professionals, architects, and anybody else, although we have cloud backup, is if one of these drives dies, and trust me, they fail, even brand new ones, even the nicest Samsungs, we do have some that fail. The other's still going. It tells you, pops up and says, hey, your drive failed. We're running from your second drive. And then you can go replace that first drive, add another one, and it's back up and running. So RAID 5 is very similar to, it's a mix between a RAID 1 and RAID 0. It's where you have parity. It's distributed across, and if one fails, you still have your information, and it's still faster than just a single drive. RAID 10, very similar. You have more redundancy, more drives, and just for the people that really this makes sense for, we've been running into this quite a bit with our clients that are doing tons of laser scanning, tons of photogrammetry. They have lots of files, tons of information coming in.
Right.
It doesn't make sense for them to buy, all these NVMe drives. It's expensive. There's not enough PCIe lanes to make it really worthwhile. So inevitably, you have to go back to these 6 terabyte spinning drives. We can put 3 or 4 of them in, and you can have close to 12 terabytes with redundancy on your system running fast. And then we can put our drive accelerator on it, and it's even better. So you can do RAID, and it gets kind of wild if you start Googling and adding all these drives. It's fun. So inevitably, David and I saw a commercial for an ASRock motherboard, which was the Extreme 11. We loved it. We don't use it anymore because we have new chipsets. But this guy put 21 Samsung Evos or 850 Evos on it, and they were getting 2 gigabytes per second throughput, which blew my mind at the time.
That is crazy.
No longer anymore. And we started looking at how we could get drives faster. So we found the M2 form factor. We reached out to a RAID card manufacturing company. They were working on something with a different type of slot and everything. We said, stop making M2. So now we have our X16 NVMe drive, which has 4 of these in it, in RAID 0. You can do a RAID 1, you can do a RAID 10, but we put them in RAID 0. What we found through our partners, Kelly Cohn at ClearEdge, who works with point clouds day in, day out, was dying to get his hands on one of these. And he called us and he said, first of all, when processing and registering in Cyclone, it's 40% less time, just from adding the RAID drive, not one of our computers, just the RAID drive. Because when you're reading and writing point clouds, it's going back and forth from your disk, looking at all those different files.
Yep.
So by just adding 1 drive, you cut 40% of the time. Okay, the next thing he said was, when I open up Navisworks models that have point clouds in them, on a spinning drive, it would take me 30 minutes. On an SSD, a really good SSD, it'd probably take 5. On our RAID drive, it takes 30 seconds at max. If you've ever sat and opened up multiple Navisworks files and gone and gotten coffee and came back, and do you want to, we can't find the materials, hit cancel, and it keeps going.
That's a ridiculous speed boost. by the way, everybody out
Instantaneous.
there. That is craziness. You're going from 30 minutes, you said, on a spinning drive, 5 minutes on an SSD standard, like what you can do, like what I have in my laptop, down to, well, probably not what I have in my laptop, but, down to 30 seconds.
And we're talking like 5 or 6 gigabyte files with point clouds and models and this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
So, one
Good
thing that
Lord.
came out was Navisworks is a really, really elegant program. I mean, you think about something that was written a while back. It's highly parallel. It uses lots of cores. It uses fast drive speed.
Yep.
And that kind of leads us into the next topic is, a lot of software companies have not been programming for a beefed up computer. Just to be honest with you, they know
Right.
most people don't have them, right? Your laptop you're running on.
Well, for goodness sake, Revit's still a single thread.
It's single thread, and the reasons for it, I don't think it'll ever change. I am interested though with some of the blockchain technology coming out, and when you think about what blockchain is really used for, I know a lot of people think cryptocurrency. It really is a way to kind of have a database, access information, tracking, when it happened, and what was supposed to be where. It keeps track of information excellently, which Revit is inevitably just a database that has a visual aspect to it, right? I mean, a wall's a wall. If you ever had a Kobe export, you can see everything that was in your model down to the button, and that is what is happening when you manipulate a Revit file, which is why it's single threaded, is because it has to go through and check to make sure the wall you just shifted, everything else it was touching now has to change, right? And it can't do multiple calculations because each calculation depends on the previous calculation.
Right.
So it's not highly parallel. And when we talk about parallel, we're talking about code and things that can be broken out and lots of different problems happening at the same time, and then come back together at some point for that output deliverable. When you think about point cloud processing, all those points, trying to register and compare it, that's a highly parallel situation. Photogrammetry, very, very parallel. That's actually one of the things we were benchmarking. We have a new prototype 16 core 32 thread. It's running at like 4.5. I had it up to 4.7, but had to dial it back a little bit. And I noticed it didn't do as well as our 10 core overclocked at like 4.6 for scene. But when I put it on photogrammetry like Pix 4D, it shredded. I mean, I had a data set. It was 240 pictures. I flew on a job site in Orlando, and I put them on my laptop, and I literally gave up. 10 days later, my laptop was still in the corner smoking, and I went to get coffee this morning, hit go, and I came back and it was done. It was done.
I think that laptop that you have needs a little bit of liquid cooling.
It
if
does.
It's smoking that bad.
No liquid cooling on this one. But I think one of the things that's changing with how people are designing software, and I know our partners are actually waking up, and that's on their roadmap this year, is to make programs that actually access and leverage multiple GPUs, more cores on the CPU.
Right.
And that happened, and just, people did argue with me about this night and day, but VR came out, right? Whether you like VR or not, it was a fad, right? And it might not be adopting now. Everybody's on mixed reality or augmented reality, but what it did do was make everyone realize how bad the computer they have is, and that they need something else, right? So now that you have people that are looking, hey, can I get dual graphics cards because I want to have better virtual reality? I want it to be smooth. I don't want it to be choppy. Well, now everybody has designated graphics cards. They have dual graphics cards, and all these programs are now having to rethink. Well, we only programmed it for one graphics card, right? Now that someone has that, another company that can leverage multiple graphics cards is going to beat us. In the real-time rendering game, the more horsepower you can get, more hardware you have, and leverage, the better it's going to be, right? So I think you see a lot of software companies now playing catch up on that. And that's been part of the reason we have such great success, is because we get down to that minutia, nuts and bolts. We partner with those companies. We show kind of where we're seeing problems. Our clients tell us that, and then they can also give us feedback as to what hardware works best for them. But it really is application specific. I mean, the machine that we were talking about for Revit, amazing at Revit, but when you go to Navisworks, if you live in Navisworks all day, every day, a 6-core with one of these RAID cards is a better solution for you. And you could do all these programs on all these computers, and that's one of the things that makes us different. Our 10-core machine runs at 4.5 gigahertz. Most 10-core machines, and we even bumped into an IT manager. He goes, "Oh, you're working with 10-core? It's a Xeon." Xeons are the slowest thing in the world. They are a 9-bit CPU, which most people don't know. It's the ninth bit is for error correcting, but every computer crashes. Anyhow, so we run our 10 core at 4.5 gigahertz, which means it's exceptional at point cloud processing, but it also blows Revit away, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not point cloud processing, you'd want to get the 5 gigahertz 4 core. So when people talk about entry level model, high end model, we get rid of all that. It's what do you need for what you're doing.
Now,
right?
what I understand also, Buck, is that on your site, you guys are building a what am I doing configurator as opposed to a pick your parts and pieces configurator, right?
We are, and that typically comes from the fact that not that I don't love getting phone calls with people telling me what they're doing, but we want to make it easy for people. You don't need to know, even though this segment we're talking about hardware. Not everybody wants to know what's in their system.
Right.
They just need to know what they use. So in our configurator that's being worked on right now, you'll have two boxes. It'll be a primary solution and a secondary solution, and icons from the industry. You can drag and drop what programs you use primarily and what programs you use secondary. And we have created all this logic that will spit out what the best machine for you, recommended upgrade options. It'll also ask, what are your typical file sizes? Are you working with, if you're working with point clouds, is this an everyday thing or is this a once in a blue moon? If you're doing VR, is this for presentations or, what are you trying to get out of this? And then it spits out a computer. It will show you what the case looks like, give you upgrade options, and tell you about it. But we don't think people need to know what's in it. We'd love them to, but they just need to know what they do, right?
I'm a little frightened here, Buck. If I go in there and I tell it what I do every single day and what types of solutions I need, I'm afraid it's going to blow my budget out of the water. Will I have an ability to kind of specify a budget and get some well, if you can only spend this much, then you need to go with this, as opposed to here's the ideal. Yeah, it's the ideal, but what can I afford reality-wise?
It might say, dude, you're getting Adele. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. I'm getting the MSI. Actually, here, I pulled this up a moment ago. This is going to be my liquid cooling solution for my laptop here pretty quick here. Just so you know. Actually, I know that there's a couple of companies who are doing some liquid cooling, like this. And there's also, of course, the home mod variation of that, just some tubes running into your machine. But yeah, no, if I do have a budget and I don't want to have this huge brick of a liquid cooled system and I want to get something that's going to meet my needs, will I be able to spec a budget and then also see my options on your site?
You definitely will.
Awesome. That's awesome.
I think in going to the budget thing, we have talks, and I think it's a changing paradigm in our industry. Anytime somebody comes with a budget, I go, where'd you get the budget? It's very similar to estimation, right? Where did those numbers come from? Well, that's what I spent on my Dell last year. And I'm like, well, that's the computer that you're saying doesn't do what you need it to do.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
And then when we start looking at things like efficiencies, right? If I can save you 20% of the time, it's typically not, I don't know. I think there's a discrepancy in perspective. A lot of times we talk to IT manager and they go, well, that's 2 times what the Dell is, right? But if we're saving 40%, the owner of that company would probably say, all day long buy it because I'm now going to be able to bill out 40% or 30% or 20% more, which is way more than the difference between the Dell and the Bimbox.
Yeah, exactly.
We actually have my favorite IT manager in Orlando, Charlie. The first time we called, I think someone in his company bought one of our laptops, and he called me a week later and said, "This is the most expensive thing ever. We're probably not going to do this." And 4 days later, he called me, got 3 more. And then said, you have desktops? And I said, well, yeah, I got desktops. He goes, my people are saving 20 to 30% of time. And he said, from the bottom line, we need more of these. And everyone who's productive is going to get one. At the end of the year, if you don't have a Bimbox on your desk, you probably should be looking for another job. That was kind of his pitch on this. Well, if you're Facebooking all day long, right, and they know who's doing that,
right,
you don't need one, right?
Exactly.
But if you're being productive, you will get more done, and you'll make your money back. So I always like to talk about the budget thing. We talk about in pre-con meetings how many cranes we're going to put on a job, right? And it's between 5 or 6, and everybody goes, let's just get the 6th one. We'll get more done, right? But we never look at computers like that.
Right.
That 6th crane probably costs us $120,000 over the course of the job. Didn't even think twice about it. But then they go to get a laptop, and they're like, well, it's another $700. You're going to be using that all day long. It is either going to be a miserable 3 years, or you're going to be productive, bragging, and knocking things out and going home early and spending more time with your family. And I think that inevitably is the decision that everybody has to make. But that's pretty much our view on things. And I think we have a fantastic conversion rate. When someone has gotten a demo machine, which we're kind of getting away from because we're getting slammed, we don't have any more demo machines. They're all
Right.
just all sold. You know, they don't want to get rid of it, and they end up buying another one within 2 weeks. Most of the companies we work with. So I think it's going to take us a while, and it's going to take a lot of people touching, feeling, meeting us at these events like Build, seeing how well it performs, seeing the numbers. But if you have a problem, we definitely have the solution for it. And I think that's always kind of been the biggest things. If you don't have a problem, we're probably not the right company for you. If your Dell's just smoking through, you're good, right? I'm not going to ever tell you buy something you don't need. But the people we're running into, and I think it's going to be an increasing number due to the fact that all of a sudden drones and laser scanners are starting to become prevalent, and people are creating massive amounts of data. Models are getting bigger, big projects. There's going to be an increasing need for things like this. And as much as I would love to send it to the cloud, you're just not going to get the performance in the cloud. And there's this thing called latency. So anyhow, it's enough of a ramble. I know I owed you 2 minutes, but that's probably it.
All right. Let's see here. What time are we looking at? We are about 4 minutes from the official end of our show here. So, that said, you may have just taken your 2 minute soapbox. Maybe you didn't. I don't know. But let's actually go into that segment. So this segment here of our show, guys, this is when we give our guests the opportunity to talk for 2 minutes about whatever topic they want, BIM related or otherwise. And so 2 minutes on the clock here. Go ahead, Buck. Tell me what your 2 minute rant is in the world.
You know, I don't know if, well, you know what I do know what my 2 minute rant is. You know, I tried to not be a curmudgeon. I try not to be a naysayer, and everyone says I'm kind of a pessimist. I generally like to think I'm a happy person. But, you know, I think my rant would be that sometimes for an industry that's 10 years behind in hardware, or technology for that matter, you know, big data just came out, RFIDs, everyone's getting excited about location tracking, and you think, financial industries have had this for 20 years. Walmart mastered the RFID a long time ago. None of this stuff is groundbreaking, right? It's exciting, it's cool. There are all these great applications coming out. And I think that our technology, the providers are probably 10 years ahead of our actual project teams and the masses. And that void really creates a problem. You know, I always like to say that a lot of companies leave the majority behind, right? They're not bringing them along. They're not helping them get there. And I think that has been one of the ways that we've selected our partners. You know, I was talking to you before we got on here. You know, BIM Track is one of our partners, and we got to meet Carl and Christian up at Built, and they showed me what they were doing, and I was like, anyone that does Navisworks should literally have this tool. This is like, you know, my guys at Balfour, they're sitting there and they're screenshotting and dragging to Bluebeam and making these PDF reports of critical clashes and monitoring them, tracking them. And they see BIM Track, and I was like, it's $10 a month, and it's so necessary for what we do. Or, you know, Brett Young, Revit MEP, he's trying to get rid of Navisworks altogether, man. He wants it to be coordinated through the design process, which I love. You know, that's not reinventing the wheel. It's going back and finding a process that could be done better. Right. So I think as much as I love all this space age, it's fun. Trust me, augmented reality. I can't wait till everyone has, you know, one of those. What are they? The visors. The
HoloLens.
No, what is the daiquiri?
Oh, daiquiri. Yeah.
The day that everyone on a job site has a $7,000 daiquiri, live streaming the model and all that stuff, that's wonderful. I don't think it's coming soon, and I would rather focus our efforts on bringing the rest of the industry up. You know, when I said that the 95% probably aren't doing things well, you know, I think we need more Gordons. We need more people like you that are going to get out here and evangelize and bring that industry up to get that 95 down to 50, to get that 50 down to 20, down to 10. And I think until we really do that as an industry in the whole, you know, we're going to be struggling. Bimbox on our end, you know, everybody says, well, you're selling expensive computers. We actually are partnering with some architectural firms to get students at cost laptops and workstations. You know, it's big for us, the young people growing up. They need to be able to experience and have a good experience with real-time rendering, architectural tools. We want it to be exciting. I mean, if you look around, there are not a lot of young BIM people. It's hard to find BIM people. It's hard to find folks that have good skill sets. Every time I talk to a recruiter, well, do you know anybody? Because we can't find anyone, right? And we need to make sure that there's the young group coming up through the ranks that understands this stuff, has good process, good development skills, and can execute. So we're trying to make our effort, and I think all our partners are. And at the last 2 seconds of this, because I know it's over, got to give a shout out to my parents and Phil Reed and Adam Thomas, who's on vacation, and David Thurwell, and Kaylin and Stacy. We love you guys. Those are back at the office. So
that's right. That's right. All right, guys. Well, everybody, I really appreciate your time today in watching our show. We hope to get some good feedback from you. Let us know what you thought. Let us know what you think about hardware in general. If you have any questions, feel free to email them in to us at social@bimbroadcast.com. We'll make sure that if those questions need to be shot over to Buck, that he gets those and can reply back to you. And definitely let us know, who else you'd like to see on this show. We want to be talking to people that you want to hear from, so that you get the information that's meaningful to you in your daily job. So thank you all for your time. We really do, again, appreciate it. And don't forget to hit and smash that subscribe button down there. Hit the little bell so you can see when we go live. There's a lot of plans here to be doing some impromptu live shows. So by all means, subscribe up and be notified when we're streaming something or talking to somebody new, not on the necessarily schedule there. So yeah, just make sure you're staying informed. All right, guys, peace out. We'll catch you later, and have a fantastic day.